People don't actually understand what happens when you put $150 million of corporate money into a failing sport. In 2010, Reliance ran that exact experiment on Indian football. They bought the commercial rights, built a new league, and attempted a hostile takeover of the entire football ecosystem. Today, we asked 15 years later, was Reliance the best or worst thing for Indian football?
Before the ISL was launched, Indian football was financially struggling. There was no TV coverage, no broadcast rights, and football was barely surviving as the I-League. Then Reliance stepped in with broadcast deals, franchise agreements, and serious marketing budget that completely changed the game. This injected millions into the ecosystem. It brought marketing, celebrities, a huge media buzz. So the Ambanis created the Indian Super League. Now this was massive. It wasn't just a local league or a competition. It turned into a media frenzy. Celebrity owners, primetime TV slots, packed stadiums, and really building a brand around it. Basically, they wanted to replicate the IPL for football.
So credit where credit's due, right? Lots of clubs in the ISL were able to do things that no previous football club was able to do. Things like sports science was introduced. Facilities for the top clubs were at a different level now, right? And the idea was that that would eventually filter down. More on that later. Player salaries shot through the roof overnight, and Indian football in general just had some more expertise that just weren't available to them before, because there were foreign coaches coming in and just all sorts of professional staff that you need for a good football operation. And the cherry on the cake was the international players that they were able to attract. Now, don't get me wrong, they were past their prime, but having big names like Del Piero, Roberto Carlos, David Trezeguet in the league just was inevitably going to create hype on top of this new product that they've packaged up anyway. Immediately, the credibility was way higher than the previous league had ever been able to garner. The move immediately boosted so much credibility, and it felt like at the time the transformation of Indian football would just go on and on.
ISL clubs eventually invested into academies and youth programs. Now this is something which the I-League lacked. Also, the other key thing it changed was the mentalities. Kids finally thought they had a structure and a path to pro. Parents thought that this was a viable career as soon as they heard how much ISL footballers were making. This was a real key that really changed the landscape of Indian football. This led to more scouting, more training networks. This meant that young aspiring Indian footballers could actually be scouted, could go into an academy system and their talent actually be nurtured. Before, until they got much older, for example, under 17s or under 18s, this is where they first get noticed and filtered into first team football. Now, from the ages of 7 or 8, they'd be able to have great coaching all the way up until under 17s or under 18s, making them much more equipped for first team football. However, this was a great start and great in the short term to build hype, but this is where the problems really got started. With Reliance having the commercial power and signing a deal with commercial rights, broadcasts, real serious investment in marketing, the AIFF had the I-League, and the first tussle was between which was the top division. For years, the I-League and the ISL run simultaneously. Why this was important was it led to real governance issues. For example, if they were both the top league, if someone won the I-League and another club won the ISL, which team got promoted into the AFC Championship? Now this was where the tensions really started, because it's a tussle between the money. For example, the ISL, although one may want different league structures like promotion and relegation, the other may want a closed leagues to protect its owners and its own franchises. This was a serious problem, and as we'll explain later in the video, really caused a crack in Indian football.
Traditional football culture in India struggled because of this closed league, so no promotion and relegation. Now let's really get into why that's a problem. Football is built on rewarding merit. So any football fan knows the feeling of either chasing a title, but more importantly for this conversation, avoiding relegation. To live and fight another day, right? Going through the journey with your club. That's kind of what the European football product is. An even more extreme example of that is like a team in the really low leagues climbing their way up through good investment and good financial decisions, as well as good footballing decisions. And this system is built on one key factor: jeopardy. The fear of consequences and the chance at glory. Now, a closed league immediately means no jeopardy. It means that no matter how well you perform, you're guaranteed to play in the same league the very next season. So before creating that product the way Europe and even South America have, India went straight for, we just want that big league. Now, we've already gone over the advantages of having that much investment to just create a big league, that's fine. But when you don't have that real substance underneath, you're always at a bit of a risk.
When the Indian Super League launched for the first couple of seasons, everything looked really good. for example, what Jay said, you got new foreign stars, Robert Pires coming in, and the ISL was fresh. However, it was a short tournament, but really the things it needed to look to was the long-term infrastructure. Although they had said loads of things about great academies and that they invested more in infrastructure, they really needed to put their money where their mouth is and invest in these. When it came to the 4th and 5th season of the I-League, you could see that not much fresh talent was being produced. Therefore, more investment was needed in the academies rather than just paying huge, massive transfers for first team players.
Now, all of this essentially means that even though there was a big financial deal on the table, the individual clubs that actually operated in the league couldn't make much money. So because in Europe you have clubs that are able to generate revenue because of that really cult-like following, you didn't have that. You didn't build that into the ISL clubs. What they did is to try sell the league and to have the pie, the football pie, just be generated through this league being a big product, and then all the clubs are just going to take a cut of whatever that overall revenue is. But that's kind of not how football works. That has to work in line with the individual clubs being able to monetize their fan bases, which they weren't able to do. So as soon as that initial media buzz fell off a little bit and that initial pie of the league started shrinking slightly, less people started coming to ISL games as the years went on because that initial buzz was gone. The pie just got smaller and smaller. But because they had professional standards they had to upkeep, the cost kept getting bigger and bigger. At that point, it just became a norm that Indian clubs were just going to lose money. And to the point today, it's just a complete norm now, and it's just accepted that if you're in Indian football, don't expect it to make any money, especially at the top level when it comes to professional top-tier clubs.
And this is the key point of the video, is that revenue streams, for example, like ticket sales, merchandising, what clubs would earn for broadcast rights, none of this, their revenue streams in those were so small. Firstly, because the broadcasts were done by Jio and Reliance. Secondly, that they weren't selling much kits or many tickets in the stadiums because they hadn't built a cult-like following. This meant that they really were just over-reliant on Reliance Central Fund, and the AIFF as well were very dependent on them. Now, as soon as Reliance has obviously stepped away from Indian football, this has left a massive hole.
And basically what that's meant now is not only is their sponsorship value so much lower, I mean, who's the new sponsor that they got?
Fancode.
Fancode. The amount that they're paying the AIFF to be the top sponsor is less than what a local Kerala league is getting in India, which is ridiculous. But that happened because of that, no pun intended, reliance on one company to basically solve everything. It looked great initially, but this is basically where you face the consequences of that decision 15 years down the line. So I guess the question, to bring it back, was Reliance the best or worst thing for Indian football?
So I think the main thing it did, which was it really needed, and to be honest, you could argue it saved Indian football, was the investment.
Yeah.
The money in Indian football was really struggling, and the money was needed. However, apart from the money, I think that they got off in the complete wrong direction due to the governance.
Correct.
As I mentioned before, with Reliant holding most of the power, as it had the money to spend, the AIFF really couldn't do too much.
Yeah.
However, what you have is basically at the top of Indian football, one organisation and one federation basically having attention. Now that means, especially for example, it took 5 years to sort out what the top division was between the ISL and I-League.
That's ridiculous.
Now, if you need to restart from Indian football, like kind of the ISL was meant to start, you need a clear pyramid.
Yeah.
And this was something that was always going to be a problem until it got addressed. And now, as we've seen with Reliance leaving, the AIFF is basically back to square one, or even worse, because it doesn't even have a commercial partner.
Literally what I was going to go on to say is that it set a precedent that if a big corporate invests in Indian football, not only will they not profit, but they'll essentially waste their money. Now that's the problem, not just because of the last 15 years and what we just outlined. It means that a future corporate isn't going to want to do that. We saw that with the sponsorship deal. No one put in a bid to sponsor the ISL when they had the almost arrogance to just assume that everyone would be lining up because they're the top division. They didn't get that. They've accepted a really low sponsor now, and the precedent's kind of set until they turn something around that there's no money in it for people. There's no money in it for the big corporates. There's no money in it for the club owners. The people who've got the clubs, they're basically just business families who've just happened to invest in football as a hobby. That's also not a good precedent, because are they that incentivized to use their sort of expertise as big industrialists to try grow Indian football? I don't see that.
Yeah.
So there's more problems that have been created, in my opinion, because of this. But I wouldn't say that's Reliance's fault. They put up the money.
Yeah.
It should have just had better direction.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Actually, it's not the point that there wasn't enough money in Indian football. It's the fact that when there even was enough money, people weren't using it correctly.
Correct.
They didn't have, for example, what the MLS has, which was salary caps, which was a certain amount of people from the academy. Everything that should be shrewd and frugal about football business also wasn't, and that was due to governance, but also a mentality that we can just keep buying players, and then instead of making transfers like a revenue generating salary in terms of from the academy and for selling players on, all they were doing was losing money on their transfers, therefore having a negative bank balance.
And the last thing is that players, yes, it's great that they got paid more, because it like provides an incentive for younger people to get into it. It's a viable career. It's easier for parents to understand. All of that's good, but usually quality of football correlates with how much you get paid. So the better league that you play in, the more you get paid. Generally, the better player you are, the more. Football. I like the simplicity in it, right? What I said earlier about it rewarding merit. But now Indian football's in this weird situation where, in the global leagues, it's ranked super badly because the quality of the league's not good. Yet the players get paid loads. So now the top players are even incentivized to just settle and stay in Indian football and just stay in the system, because they're going to be getting paid more money in India than if they went abroad, which is another problem, because now where does that improvement come from? Now, Sunil Chhetri obviously tried to go to Portugal. We realized that, okay, there's a big gulf. I think that gulf of quality is even bigger now because of this system, unfortunately. So, yeah, they tried to be the best thing, but they ended up maybe being the worst.
So guys, as you know, our conclusion was Reliance really did help Indian football. However, the AIFF became too reliant on them, and this was the massive paradox. Let us know what you guys think below. Cheers.